This video is a sequel to my guide on how to transition from a beginner to a novice. So if you haven't completed a game jam before, the link is in the description. I will be describing a novice as someone who is capable of completing a game jam, and intermediate as someone whose knowledge is no longer the primary limiting factor when creating games. Setting the stage. So you have just completed your first game jam. Congratulations! You're now in the top 30% of people who have pursued this hobby, and you're gonna quickly realize that you're still nowhere near where you need to be in order to make great games. Unlike the beginner to novice pathway that is pretty linear, novice to intermediate is pretty dynamic and will look a bit different for everyone. It is dependent on who you are and what your goals are. Step 1. Choosing a realistic goal. The biggest filter in game dev is that you stop having fun making games. The concept of burnout can be real, but as long as you continue to find the work meaningful, it's going to be pretty irrelevant. Some people are only going to be motivated if they work on their dream game. I would heavily recommend that you don't and pursue something that is lower in scope. But if the only way for you to enjoy game dev is to try and make a larger scope project, then proceed. If you have multiple goals, then you have options. The best choice will always be the lowest scope idea that you can enjoy making. At this point in time, you should be a lot less concerned about making a game that's going to sell, and more so just trying to finish a project to understand what is actually required to complete a game. Step 2A. Adjusting your realistic goal. In all likelihood, you've chosen a goal that is probably not going to be finished. And in around 6 months, you're going to start doubting your project. This is where you need to decide whether you need to abandon your existing project or to lower the scope of what you are currently making. I was personally making a first-person stealth game, and I kind of realized after 6 months that I had taken on more than I could chew. A big part of this was HD graphics, which is easy to pull off with environments, but incredibly difficult for anything organic. The other issue was that I just stopped enjoying the project. After a month of basically making zero progress, I decided that I had to move on. Unfortunately though, this is a step that you may have to repeat more than once. In my case, I tried to make an immersive sim as my next game, which took me a year before I realized it would take me an additional 7 years to complete this project. Step 2B. Creating small milestones. It's really important to feel like you've accomplished something notable every month. Game dev is a marathon, and after you get through the early phases of development, you tend to forget how much you've actually accomplished. I set up this YouTube channel to largely document my journey, but also to give back to the Godot community. While I was making my now abandoned projects, I was also making short tutorials for the engine as a way to give back. This is a really good way to accomplish something in your game dev journey, as a tutorial is pretty easy to finish. However, it is once again critical that you enjoy what you make, and making tutorials is not going to be enjoyable for everyone. Another way you can achieve small milestones is by joining a game dev community, either local or online, and participating in various events where people share their demos for feedback. These events can happen every 1 to 2 months depending on the community, but the main thing is that it gives you a deadline to get certain features into your game. You want your demos to be playable, different, and a clear improvement for each event. It really does help motivate you to continually work on your project, in addition to giving you a very clear before and after state for your game. A third way this can be done is to just participate in game jams. Completing a project is its own skill set, and nothing quite makes you learn how to compromise than a tight deadline. I personally don't love game jams, but I still find value in trying to do one a year. Chances are that during development of a larger game, you've had a unique idea or concept that you wanted to try out. Game jams typically come with themes, but the themes are normally flexible enough to incorporate your original idea. Either way, there's always something good in having a completed experience you can point back to as the year starts anew. Step 3. The destruction of your ego. So you've managed to continually make games that go nowhere. Skill-wise, you're so much further ahead than when you started, yet at the same time, you don't have a product that you can proudly say is yours. When people ask, what type of games do you make? You struggle with the answer. The fact that you've stuck with this hobby for so long shows that you fundamentally enjoy the process. The dream game is likely long dead, and for the first time in your life, you can see yourself having fun in making a lower scope game. And so you pursue a lower scope game with full confidence that it's actually going to be completed. It's not the most amazing game, but it has a cool concept. You share it with your friends, and you get a lukewarm positive response, but that's okay because your projects no longer define you. Each project has its own identity, and you're just a developer working on it, even if you're a solo dev. After a bit of time, you finally complete it. It's not perfect, there's still a bunch of valid criticism, normally with the art, that you haven't managed to fully address, but it is complete. And so you release it on Steam, and it flops. This is where you have to ask yourself, is this hobby worth continuing? Hopefully the answer is yes, but for many people the answer is no. If you are still having fun despite the flops, and you are willing to learn from your mistakes, take on new challenges, and aren't really deterred by the harshness of game dev, which is most people fail, then congratulations, you are now an intermediately skilled developer. Step 4. A Phoenix Rises. It's a lot easier to build off failure than it is to build off nothing. Once you've made one system, it's a lot easier to rebuild and alter it in a way that corrects the mistakes you originally made. It's still not as easy as building off success, but it's also better than nothing. A lot of young, successful people suffer from survivorship bias, and while there is plenty of truth in their advice, it often misses the larger picture. In order to succeed, you need to make something that is true to yourself, and to have something be aligned with what the customers want. This is a unique and ever-changing formula for every single individual, and how long it takes for you to find that winning formula does require some luck. It is also worth noting that certain people will have multiple paths to success while others will have less. You need to start playing to your strengths and start planning how to remove or mitigate your weaknesses. You're unlikely to get this right the first time, and occasionally you need to play out your doubts to get a clearer answer for the next project. 2 videos I think are really worth watching is Jonas Troller's video on design decisions, which is really useful for game development, and Doug's guide for new content creators, which is really good advice for pursuing any career revolving around online entertainment. An important concept to think about is the 3 different types of failures. A catastrophic failure is when you're noticeably worse off. A game dev example would be someone who quit their job and refinanced their home only for the game to flop, leaving you in debt and maybe divorced. A standard failure would be when you're no better off than when you started. A game dev example would be someone who quits after their first game flops. You spend all this time learning and getting good at a hobby, only to throw it all in the trash. Alternatively, it's someone who just keeps making the same mediocre games over and over again without really improving. And then we have the concept of failing forward. These are the failures where, despite not getting the end result you wanted, you're still significantly further ahead of where you started. You should aim to get this as a consolation prize no matter what you work on. I'm currently making my next game Heal to Death. It's a healer roguelike. Think MMORPG healing with procedurally generated dungeon exploration. Your NPC party members slay everything in your path while you keep them alive, kind of like a necromancer of the light. This is not a game that I could make without having failed forward multiple times. I could go into all the little failures adding up to make this game possible, but I'd rather not make this video last for too much longer. The point I'm trying to make is that the only real difference between a pro game dev and an intermediate game dev is whether or not they have made something that people actually want. Maybe you have a skill set that you need to polish. Maybe your genre is too competitive. Maybe you're working on a game that doesn't align with your strengths. Maybe the initial premise of your game was flawed from the very beginning. Maybe you're just not good enough to do game dev alone. You need to pivot away from working hard to working smart and actually identify why your games are not succeeding. You're at the point where generic advice isn't going to lead you to the next destination. You need to find your unique formula for success, and nobody is going to be able to tell you how to do that. So welcome to the intermediate landscape. You may be here for a short period of time, or you may be here forever. Good luck.